and thank you for joining us on The Spin Room. I'm your host, Ami Kaufman. Today we are joined by Deputy Minister in charge of public diplomacy in the Prime Minister's office, Dr. Michael Oren, a former Israeli ambassador to the United States and a member of the Kulanu Party, which is part of the Likud-led coalition. Oren is a published historian with a PhD from Princeton. A fascinating fact that many may not know about him is that Dr. Oren was arrested repeatedly by the KGB when he worked with the Zionist underground in the Soviet Union. Dr. Oren, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Ami.
Our first topic is the latest UNESCO fiasco. Israeli officials are criticizing the UN's World Heritage body for recognizing the old city of Hebron in the West Bank as a Palestinian World Heritage Site. UNESCO's ruling also puts Hebron on its danger list. The Tomb of the Patriarchs, also known as the Ibrahimi Mosque, is located in the center of the city and is revered by Jews, Muslims, and Christians as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's burial place. So, Dr. Oren, I want to start with this topic. You actually went to Twitter right afterwards, and you wrote some pretty harsh words. We're going to show it up on screen. It said UNESCO is a grave robber stealing Jews' most sacred burial site, and it did that next to the place where millions of Jews have no graves. Pretty harsh words. You want to elaborate on that? What do you mean when you call
Glad to see people following me on Twitter, Ami. That's great. Thank you. But the whole thing's outrageous. It's outrageous because it's not recognizing one of the holiest sites in Judaism as having any connection to Jewish heritage. We understand that Muslims and Christians also revere the cave of the Machpelah, where Abraham and our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried as a holy site, but to designate it only as a Palestinian.
But you said it doesn't refer to Judaism. Is that correct? Because I went to their website where they have the statement on this decision, on the resolution, and it specifically says that the place became a site of pilgrimage for three monotheistic religions: Judaism first, Christianity, and Islam. So it does mention Judaism.
Oh, it's wonderful that they mention Judaism, but the fact that they designate it as a Palestinian Muslim heritage site just basically negates everything they write there. And it's ridiculous. It's like saying, you know, London is not a British heritage site or Paris is not a French heritage site. What's, at the end of the day, sad about it, and indeed tragic, is that the decision was taken on Polish soil, and a country that has a painful, tragic relationship with the Jewish people and our history. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it brings us further away from peace, not closer from peace. It will have no impact whatsoever on the reality on the ground. The Machpelah will continue to be a Jewish holy place.
The Tomb of the Patriarchs, the Machpelah.
The two, yes. Right. And
well, you know, some people,
it's just going to render, it renders UNESCO even more irrelevant and ludicrous.
Well, first of all, if it's so irrelevant, I always wonder why Israelis are always talking about it so much. If they keep saying that UNESCO is so irrelevant, that's another issue. On the right wing, people are calling this decision anti-Semitic.
Well, sure.
On the left,
well, sure it is. But what's not anti-Semitic about it? When you single out the Jews either for condemnation or denying our history and our connection, 3,000-year connection to this land, what is that other than anti-Semitic? The question is, what can we do about it? And what we can do is basically to ignore UNESCO. I think that's
yeah, you've actually called in the past for the United States to just leave UNESCO.
Just leave it.
Do you think that's going to happen now after this? Because they said, Nikki Haley, the UN ambassador, said that they're reconsidering their
well, they've already defunded UNESCO.
And so have Israelis.
Not enough, because we didn't have a piece of legislation like the United States. It's a piece of legislation going back to 1994 that said if any UN agency recognizes a state of Palestine outside of negotiations, by the way, which is one of the principles of the Oslo Accords, then the United States would defund the agency. And so when UNESCO recognized Palestine, by law, the United States had to defund. We did not. That's why the Prime Minister can turn around and say...
That was back in 2011 when they did that recognition, right?
That's why the Prime Minister can come around and say, okay, we can now take $1 million out of what we give to UNESCO and build a Jewish heritage site, which is perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, the only tool that the United States has less in its toolbox at UNESCO is just to get out.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut you off there. When we come back, more with Deputy Minister Michael Oren. Stay with us. We're back on the Spin Room. Thanks for staying with us, and still with Dr. Michael Oren, Deputy Minister. Moving to our next topic, Donald Trump and his recent Mideast efforts to bring peace to the region. Sir, while in his recent visit to the Mideast, he began to push this regional approach to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm wondering with you out loud, are you worried that this kind of approach may force Israel to make some concessions that are maybe painful or even dangerous to its security? Is that something that worries you?
No. But having said that, I think any Israeli who thinks that we can achieve a regional peace without making concessions is deluding him or herself. Of course, if we're going to have any peace, it's going to involve concessions on all sides. Now, the Arabs have a great amount to give us. Whether it be in overflight rights or our ability to do business in the Gulf area, the meeting of Arab capital with Israeli innovation could be revolutionary for this region. Right. But that doesn't rule out the bilateral sphere as well. They should work in tandem. Right. We should be getting the Arab states to give the Palestinians the backing they need, because they're very weak, to come into renewed negotiations with us.
Trump asked the Israelis to kind of hold back on settlements, yet the Prime Minister recently boasted on Twitter that he's building a new settlement in the West Bank. And there are reports of thousands of new units to be built in East Jerusalem and some parts of the West Bank. Why? It doesn't seem like the Israeli administration, Israeli government is being very helpful to Donald Trump's efforts to bring peace to the region. Why not just listen to his request and do what he asks?
That's a very good question. I think that the new settlement that's being built is being built to replace an older settlement that was destroyed. That's Amona. But leave that aside. Almost all the building that's been announced has been in those areas which everybody knows, whether it be the Trump administration, the Palestinians, the Arabs. They know that we'll be part of Israel as part of any regional or local.
Do you think the United States sees that new settlement as just it's something to replace an old settlement? Or
listen, I'm in contact with the administration. I know that they do want us to hold back. They want to exercise restraint. I appreciate the fact that they have not made the settlement issue the major issue as it was during the previous administration, and to create a situation where if the Americans are demanding a total freeze over the 67 lines, no Palestinian can enter the negotiations, because no Palestinian leader can be less Palestinian than the President of the United States. It's created space. I think, yes, we have to honor the President's request to show restraint.
We should honor that. Okay.
Yes,
I want to thank Israeli Deputy Minister Michael Oren for joining us. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
Stick around. Up next, we'll discuss the comments made here with two of our favorite pundits. We'll be right back. We are back on the Spin Room with two of our favorite panelists, Alison Kaplan-Summer of the English edition of Haaretz and Daniel Pomerantz of Honest Reporting. Thank you both for coming back on the show, guys.
Thanks.
So you watched the interview with Deputy Minister Michael Oren. Let's start with the first topic that we talked about. I'll start with you, Daniel. That was about the UNESCO vote on Hebron, clearly saying that the vote was anti-Semitic. Not going a bit too far, or would you agree with that?
Well, there has been a campaign for some time now by the Palestinian mission to the UN to remove the Jewish references from any number of sites, including in Jerusalem. It's specifically focused on Judaism. It's something that we don't see being done to any other religion in the world. So in that sense, it does fit the international definition of anti-Semitism. But more than that, what nobody's talking about is the resolution also listed it as an endangered site, which is a terribly severe designation. Just to give a little perspective, this site is open to the public 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. It has a 4.5-star rating on TripAdvisor, over 500,000 positive reviews.
Wow, TripAdvisor. That's the first, okay.
You compare that to Joseph's tomb, which has been burned to the ground twice by Palestinians.
What does that get on TripAdvisor?
It doesn't. It doesn't. Rachel's tomb, where people get attacked by firebombs and gunfire. Yeah. Not to mention Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, where ISIS are destroying sites all over the world. And what did the UN have to say about these sites? Nothing.
Alison, what do you think? Anti-Semitic, I'm going to bring you back to that original question. Pretty harsh words from Dr. Michael Oren. What do you think?
I don't know if I would call it anti-Semitic. I think it's an odd talking point. I haven't only heard Minister Oren say it, but other Likud politicians hitting on the fact that the meeting was in Warsaw, Poland. Is like, what does it have to do with the Holocaust?
Yeah.
So there's that. I think that the reaction to the decision on Jerusalem hit a lot harder because there are some things going on in Hebron that Israel's doing that people object to, and this is sort of the UNESCO way of hitting back.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. The site's open to all religions from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day. What's the problem?
No, I'm talking about the overall situation in the city of Hebron.
The overall situation in the city, not at the site.
In the city.
So you think the resolution was about the city, not about the site?
It is. The statement is about the whole city. It talks about the site as well, but it does talk about the whole city.
Well, I think it's important as a matter of context to realize the situation in the city is exactly what was described in the Oslo Accords. So if we're saying that the UN or the Palestinians should throw out the Oslo Accords, that's not an illegitimate talking point, but we should be clear, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
The other point with UNESCO is the way that the Israeli representative there reacted. He staged a fake phone call on his telephone, and he said, "I have to go fix my toilet in Paris, and that's more important than this decision."
His plumber is calling him on the phone, and he has to go answer the phone because this is more important than this decision that you guys just took.
Right. So I think this direction of disrespecting the UN and the UN institutions, if you want to defund, fine. If you want to delegitimize, fine. But I don't think that spitting in the face, instead of maybe standing up and giving an eloquent speech as to why the decision was off base, I don't know if this government's, sort of strategy of thumbing its nose and spitting in the face of the United Nations is particularly effective.
Well, let's not just focus on this. He also says some stuff about Trump and settlements, and he seemed to hint, I think, that Israel should try to listen a bit more to the administration about holding back on settlements. Is that what you guys felt as well? I don't know if you felt the same thing that I did, because it doesn't seem like the administration, the Israeli administration, is doing that right now.
Well, it's always a good idea to cooperate with your allies, but it's been very clear that the United States at this moment is more concerned about the $1.12 billion in funding to encourage terrorism over the last 4 years that the Palestinian Authority has spent, rather than building houses. That's what we saw in Jared Kushner's visit, which made Abbas furious. That's what we saw in Abbas's statements to the President of the United States and his response, as well as the time that he lied to the U.S. Secretary of State Tillerson, saying he had stopped the practice, only to later announce that he had continued it.
But you have to admit that the reaction of the Netanyahu government to Trump administration calls for restraint on settlements is highly different from the way that they reacted when it was the Obama administration asking them to restrain themselves on settlements.
Well, you mean in terms of you say that under the Obama administration you think they were more responsive? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that they were more hostile, and they called it anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. And in Trump, there's like, yeah, well, that's reasonable.
Well, under the Obama administration, we saw a 10-month settlement freeze for the first time ever. Even Rabin and Peres never did such a thing. So I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of excitement about the idea of building, and yet if you look at the numbers, it's really quite restrained.
That is all the time we have, guys. I want to thank our panelists, Allison and Daniel. Stay with us. We'll be right back with the Press Gurus and close the show with David Schuster and the Schuster Brief. Stay put.